Hi. In the two previous episodes, I was highlighting my activities in 1977 after my rejoining the Department of Geology, University of Kerala at Karyavattam, after my higher studies in Syracuse University, upstate New York. Now, a departure from the previous two episodes, I will walk back to the academic activities I got involved in the first year. When I arrived in January and rejoined the Department of Geology, one of the things Menon sir told me was that Vikram, you take care of and supervise the MSc thesis research of one Mr. Rajiv Shenai, who will graduate in 1977, April or May. I said yes. Then Sir also asked Rajiv to see me related to his progress and performance in his MSc thesis research. This young man was working with the sediments of the theories of Muttam. The theory samples in the southern part of Trivandrum district, erstwhile Trivandrum district, I should say, that is up to Kanyakumari, was a very peculiar deposit which all along had been interpreted as kind of a deposit which is very special. And in fact, truly speaking, the thinking in those days regarding the red-colored theory was not more about why the color is there, but about the mineralogy. In fact, during those days, the Atomic Minerals Division of Government of India had been exploring the theories for the heavy mineral content and especially of monazite in the theories. So they had drilled several boreholes, collected samples for analysis, so on and so forth. And I took this occasion to make a visit with Shenai to Muttam and to have a first-hand look at the theories. One of the things that impressed me was the peculiar landscape, the nature of landscape. It was something like a gentle, rolling topography. Well, of course, the forest department had planted what is called a casuarina on it, because that is what the foresters, wherever there is those days, in the name of reforestation or afforestation, wherever there is a piece of public land, irrespective of where it is a geographic location, forest department officials will plant a casuarina. Anyway, casuarina did not do much harm to this theory deposit in a way. And this is the deposits had a peculiar, like I said, rolling topography, which looked like a field of very much subdued sand dunes. A closer examination showed a forested cross-bedding in several places, which is actually part of what is called coastal dunes or dunes, wherever. Dunes need not be always along the coast. In certain countries, certain locations, dunes are near the coast. In others, they can be in the interior of the land also. Then, yet another thing that made a special this deposit was the deep gullies. And the gullies actually are very steep walled and with a steep upstream end. In other words, as though the whole thing in the upstream end had collapsed to create the what is called the flat floored box-like cross-section of the gully. And actually the long profile of the gullies were actually not smooth. It had a step-like appearance. The step pattern was actually under the influence of bedrock or lithomarls. So, we had spent, Arshana and I walked around for about 3 or 4 hours and then took a bus back to Thrivikramji. And then, of course, I told Shana, what you do is you determine the sand, silt, clay content. Sand, silt, and clay content in the sediment samples. Here, something like 10 samples. We had done the texture. And of course, the texture is only for the my sieve analysis for the sand fraction. But my intent was to go further, deeper down, to figure out what is the content of sand, what is the content of silt and clay. For silt and clay, what you do is you have to do the pipette analysis. So I had to put together an assembly of, cylinders and teach him how to do a pipette analysis. Well, of course, you don't have to teach from your invention. And there is actually Petrology of Sedimentary Rocks by Robert Folk. There it is very well described to be understood easily by any beginner. So, initially, naturally, when you do the pipette analysis, you may go wrong, no doubt about it. It's a very hard task because you have to work with a stopwatch, and luckily there was a stopwatch in the department. And then the whole analysis takes a long time also, more than a day, 24-hour day. And in general, when you have to do pipette analysis, what you do is the person who does it will rather sleep in the department or come very early in the department or in the lab, like at 7 o'clock or even earlier to start off, so that at least by 10, he or she can go back home. So Shana was less compared to the rest of the youngsters in the world. Shana was very much devoted young man. So he did the analysis, and finally we discovered that in the sediment sample there is more silt and clay or mud rather than sand. In other words, the mud content, the sand, silt and clay content was something like 40, 42, 45%. And well, what you find in the field is a dune field, a subdued dune field with a very clear indication of dune forces. Well, then, the swale, the runnels and ridges, this is also visible, not to every eye, but those people who have seen this, they will immediately know it. In other words, you know what you have seen. What you have not seen will not occur in your mind. It is a rule of thumb in any field work, in any field geology, field geological studies. So, now we got all the analysis done, and then our next task was to do the histograms, usual ternary diagrams, etc., etc. And finally, plotting the sample, all those things were told to Shena. He did very meticulously all that. And finally, we had to say how a sediment sample of a deposit, a sample of a deposit, which is more with the clay or mud rather, unusually large content of mud occurring in the samples, could have been transported by a wind in order to create the dunes. So then, well, of course, there are examples all over the world about the, Permian was, I think, a period of, Permian in the sense, Permian is a geologic period during which there was a global heredity, and during which all over the world there is a presence of, geologists have reported from different continents, presence of a red bed. Red beds, they are also called. Here we call it theory for other reasons. I will explain it, why they are called theories in a different context. And I think the credit goes to a British geologist who was mapping in the 1900s, what is called not even 1800s, 1850 or later on, after the initiation of the Geological Survey of India in 1856 or so. And I think it is Bruce Foote who went around the southern Tamil Nadu, including and the so-called Tirunelveli district, and mapped the theories. He called, naturally, any geologist will have one or two supports, local people as a guide and an escort and a porter in all these respects. This even today it happens. Any person working in the field will have to get a support of a porter or a guide. So this gentleman asked Bruce Foote asked, hey, what is this? They were walking through the red theory sands of Tirunelveli district, and the Tamil escort told this white man that theory means a climb. Oh, theory. That was the reply. So he ever since these red sand deposits or stabilized red sand deposits are called TERI or theory. Theory is actually a gentle climb. When you come the other way, opposite direction, it will be slow. But anyway, that is how the name theory got into the geological lexicon of the Geological Survey of India. Even today it exists. On the other hand, the Muttam theory has undergone a different story. This theory deposit was, that was the interpretation we offered. Theory was formed by an original source, from an original source, and the original source sediment was of Arcosic composition. In the sense it had feldspar as well as quartz. It was blown over, deposited, etc., etc. Fine. Then what happened was, the feldspar in the dune deposit, or the sand sheet, which is molded into dunes, that underwent chemical weathering, because Kanyakumari district has an average rainfall of what is called somewhere around 1600 millimeter or so, whereas when you go to Tirunelveli, it is actually 900 millimeter annually. So in this condition of a monsoon climate, the so-called feldspar had undergone weathering right in the deposit itself. In other words, it was some kind of an orthogenic process that went through. And during the orthogenesis, all the feldspars decayed into clay, chemically broke down into clay. And then there is a red color. How do we account for the red color? Red color is actually an indication of Fe2O3. The occurrence of Fe2O3 as a cement or a coating on the particles, granular particles. So that is the explanation we give. And the climate in there was ideal for this. And what about the gully type weathering or gully erosion? Gully erosion is actually something that is very peculiar to any homogeneous sediment. And Chambal, for example, Chambal region of western UP is a best example of a gully erosion. And the gullies are actually a labyrinthine nature in Chambal, so that no policeman will be able to, no police force will be able to nab a culprit or a criminal once he jumps into the gully. So this kind of course, not that the gullies in what is called that Muttam theory is comparable to that of the gullies of Chambal, or for that matter, the gullies north of Visakhapatnam in a similar deposit, but not as old as the deposited theories in Muttam. So we completed the write-up. Menon sir looked at it, and that's the Shenai thanked me profusely for helping him in completing his MSc thesis. And after his MSc, Shenai apparently went to Geological Survey of India, and from there, because probably he did not like the work in the Geological Survey of India, he joined the banking service of the Reserve Bank of India. And that was the last time I have met Shenai. He probably lives comfortably, a retired life somewhere in the world. Okay, now there were other two students who also sought my help. Their President Nan, who later on became a professor and retired as a HOD from Karyavuttam campus, and Mr. Mattai, who retired as a Deputy Director General of the Geological Survey of India, now settled somewhere in Kochi. These two guys were working with the Rajendran sir, and they were working on some kind of a structural geology problem. And these guys came to me and asked, because Rajendran sir, did not so many words asked me to help them, but they came and sought my help. I said, well, of course, in academic situations, academic environment, nobody is barring help to others. Of course, then I told them that they were working somewhere in the Attapadi Valley on some structural aspects. I told them, it will be a good idea if you are being a structural geologist or if doing something related to structural geology. What you do is you look at what is called the orientation of the third order stream channels and how you go about doing it. What you do is you take the topographic sheet and then identify all those third order streams and the straight segments and measure the azimuths or the orientation of the streams. Third order stream channels wherever you have a measurable straight segment. And then you accumulate the data. Finally, you can make what is called a Rose diagram. And then you can make, of course, a circular histogram actually also you can. There is a small trick you play when you do a histogram with degree measurements. You can go through some kind of a conversion process about which I'm not talking about now. And these guys were there is a competition between these two people because both of them wanted to prove that one is better than the other in their academic work. So they were working hard, and within a month or two, I got all these data measured. And then, I told them how to classify this, classification of the readings. Because, this orientation is a double-ended reading, and therefore you have to be very careful in handling the data. Of course, there is not careful, you have to be using a certain approach. So I told them this is the approach, this shall be the approach. They did that, and finally they completed their thesis. Again, profusely thanked me for my help. And they wrote a paper with Rajendran Nair as the first author and published in Current Science. And of course, I was thanked for the association and help I offered during the research work, which finally ultimately became a publishable paper. Then yet another thing I was doing was I was also looking for some kind of a funding from a government agency to initiate a study of what is called the shoreline processes or the beach process, the coastal erosion and coastal deposition phenomenon. I wrote up a proposal in the 1977, toward the last quarter of the 1977, in response to an announcement in the what is called those days called the Committee on State Committee on Science and Technology. So the committee was presided over by the Professor A. Abraham, botany, one-time botany professor, and Sar as the executive. Sar is actually vice president. President of the associate. This agency is the Chief Minister of Kerala. So I made a project proposal with all the field work, content, etc., and what will be the expected outcome in the in the format they provided. And of course, it is little more polished and made better by my own insight into it. And then naturally, it was forwarded through the university to the Secretariat Office of the State Committee. And that is the end of it. By alongside I was working for what is called our activities related to implementation of or winning the UGC scales of pay, which actually became a very futile attempt because Mr. Anthony had brought in an ordinance when we announced in the press, through press conference that we are going to boycott, all the teachers will boycott all work related to examinations in the colleges and universities. Okay, Then, of course, the next month was in the month of January 78. Yeah. That was a very critical month for me because I was appearing for the interview for selection to the post of a reader, and along with the Professor Raju Fellow. Then there was a kind of a quote-unquote tussle, and I somehow scraped through with the help of my own friends in the syndicate through that process. And Professor Philip also became a reader. I also became a reader. So that is the, okay, then what happened by month of April, first week or second week, there was a press release in Kerala which read Thrivikramji in the parenthesis 38,000 rupees. This was published by the so-called State Committee for Promotion of Science and Technology. And Bhattadiri sir, my one-time teacher, one evening, and when we met in Statue Junction, hey, Thrivikram, hey, you got some money, it says in the news, today's paper. Then I asked, sir, which paper where you read? Then he said, I know you were not very keen about reading everything in the newspaper. I said, with a smile, yes, sir, it is true. But anyway, tell me where it is. He told me it is the fourth page under Thiruvananthapuram in the Kerala Company newspaper. Then I said, sir, I will check. Then Bhattadiri sir also added, I don't think it is 38,000 rupees was granted to me. It probably is a typo error. It is something like 3,800 rupees was a research grant. I said, in any case, I will check in the evening. When I checked, it was 38,000 rupees, my second research grant from a government agency. My first research grant was in 1969 from the United UGC, Delhi, 380 rupees toward the cost of, to meet the expenses related to my field work in a research proposal I had submitted about the Varkalai series and as in the Pavanasam beach. So that is the academic program I got involved in as soon as I came back to India. Okay.